On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with Senator John Enoh, who is the Minister of State for Industry in Nigeria. It tells me that there is a need for Nigerians to prioritize buying made in Nigerian goods, while also emphasizing that there's a national industry plan to ensure productivity across the country. It's good to have you on the program.
Yeah, Sharon, it's fine, to have you interview me.
Thank you very much. A lot has been happening in the industry space, and then there's been this conversation as regards Buy Nigeria, what's happening in terms of made in Nigerian goods and services. So can you bring us up to speed on what the ministry has been able to do to ensure that we have more made in Nigeria products in the country that can be exported as well to the world?
Well, thank you. Let me take this from the very beginning. I mean, it's when I was moved from the Ministry of Sports Development to the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, with the responsibility for industry as Minister of State, and given a mandate, one of the first issues or items of that mandate document is promotion of made in Nigeria goods and services. So what it is that it's one of the cardinal mandates and responsibilities of Nigeria's Minister of State for Industry. Having said so, I think that the pursuit of this objective is basically about 4 levels of pillars in terms of policy preferences, in terms of competitiveness support, in terms of export readiness, in terms of behavioral change, and all of that, because it has a lot to do with the attitude and consumption choices of Nigerians, basically at the end of the day. I mean, we are said to be people who have a knack for foreign-made goods. Anything that is foreign is normally preferred. I mean, it's neck deep into it. So basically, that's why one of the pillars is behavioral change. And I mean, we in pursuing this, and one of the things we try to do is to get an understanding that beyond being a patriotic thing to do, to patronize made in Nigeria goods and services, that it's also an economic necessity to achieving this. I mean, we tried to do some little study and found out how much more that the country can earn with just a simple decision to consume made in Nigeria goods. It will bring in close about 3 trillion in the short term into our national revenue. So those choices matter. I mean, you can imagine. I have taught different industries and manufacturing companies, and I've come face to face with companies that are not closed shop, companies that are doing a lot to continue to sustain their workforce by producing and manufacturing. And at the end of the day, these finished goods and products are not being bought and cannot be sold. Why are they not being sold? Because of competition with foreign-made goods. Most of these foreign-made goods have an illegal way of getting into the country. Most of them are substandard. They are just smuggled in and all of that. So there's both a patriotic and an economic necessity and need, for us to focus on made in Nigeria goods and services. The same, study also exposed the fact that this will lead to about 30% in terms of manufacturing growth, right? In terms of job and the employment, it would increase the employment to about close to 400,000 people, in the first 3, 4, 5 years. So we're pursuing that, and we're trying to make it in such a way that we're not just promoting this just for the sake of the fact that buy made in Nigeria goods, because we want to be that industrial hub, manufacturing hub, now that we are part of the AFCFTA. That means that we must be competitive. So Nigerian goods and services also need to be of good quality. So also concerned about the quality of goods and services that are produced in Nigeria.
I was just about asking that. Do you have any campaign towards in that regard?
It will be the first time, but we're taking a while because we want to get this right. in terms of the kind of campaign, nationwide campaign that we want to embark upon. A few things we've been trying to sort out, and those things have to do with what the cost of these same Nigerian goods and services. There are instances in which, made in Nigeria goods at the end of the day can even be even more expensive than goods that are brought into the country.
So do you think that there are policies? Do you think there are policies that are actually making this happen in terms of pricing? Do you think there is any support that the government can actually give to maybe businesses to ensure that probably we have it's an enabling environment, and maybe it's the pricing? Maybe there's supposed to be a policy in terms of pricing to encourage more Nigerians to purchase made in Nigerian goods.
Oh, sure. I mean, if you look at what the problem is, what is likely responsible for this? The fact that goods that are brought in from clients and from countries where the cost of doing business is lower, right? Where government is responsible for giving that enablement. And then a lot is responsible. I mean, the cost of energy, the cost of doing business in Nigeria, all of that, so the cost of finance, all of them. So by the time all of this is getting tackled, and of course, we're working hard to make sure this is getting tackled, and that's why sometime in February, and we unveiled in Nigeria industrial policy, the first indicates, which is it consolidates all of this and comprehensively addresses a lot of these concerns and challenges as we implement this going forward. So the hope is that by the time we're able to, by the kinds of interventions and policy recommendations and implementations that we embark upon, and we're able to reduce the cost of doing business, the cost of manufacturing, that will also reflect in terms of the cost of goods and services, and place us in a better position to advance the argument and the promotion and the campaigns for patronizing made in Nigeria goods and services.
Lovely response, but looking at the fact that you have your ministry has been able to come up with a blueprint of how businesses can be at ease or can operate at ease in the country, the question now would be that, is there any timeline for these policies? What should Nigerian business owners or investors in Nigeria, what's the timeline of, what should that timeline be for them to expect a more enabling environment?
Well, I think it will be a continuing challenge. I mean, there will be no definiteness to say that by this time all problems are going to get solved. No. I mean, if you look at the examples across the world, I mean, countries that have developed, countries that have industrialized, haven't achieved that because they got to a comfort zone. They got to 100% comfort. What it is that is government enabling enough? Is government showing enough commitment and enough focus about where it's directed? And I think that answer, is now, so a yes under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu with GCFR. When he was sworn in and gave his inaugural speech, he committed to industry and to industrial policy. He's delivered that, he's achieved that for the first time in decades. What it means is that there is a set of ideas that have been put together as policy for which government has committed to. There are a few things that have happened. Sometime last year, there was the temporary ban 6 months on share nut, export. That ban expired in February. A lot of industrialists who were interested in getting into processing were a bit concerned that at the end of the ban, what's going to happen? At the end of the ban in February, there's a further extension by 1 year. So there is consistency. These are the kinds of things that provide direction, that should give comfort, that should give confidence, to businessmen, to industrialists, to investors. You don't wait when everything is done. At the level of the ministry, when I set up the Industrial Revolution Work Group, that has me as chairman and the president of MAN as co-chair, and we're working quite hard in the last 1 year plus. We identified some of these constraints and challenges that we want to begin to tackle. We started the ministerial roundtables last year. By December, we had the first roundtable. It concentrated on energy, right, and tried to get all the key players that should provide a solution to energy. Minister of Power, Minister of State for petroleum gas, had people from midstream, downstream, Petroleum Regulatory Commission, had people from NEC, the regulatory body, everybody in the same room trying to solve the power and energy challenge, and came up with the fact that the solution to that is going to be blended power that combines grid, gas and renewables. We're looking at the do as some kind of template where we think that we want to solve the power situation. So it's going to continue to happen with the kind of work that we do, with the kinds of interventions, and hope that we're able to achieve very reasonably and get the confidence of the investing public, of industrialists, right, for them to know that this government is up for business and is able to support and enable what work they do.
Okay, can you bring us up to speed on the ministry's strategy to develop industrial clusters and parks to support business?
Okay, I mean, it's if you look at the Nigerian Industrial Policy 2025, it's big in terms of clustering, in terms of industrial parks, because the ministry's appreciation of clusters and parks is that these become our production ecosystems, not just land and location, but when an area is identified as a cluster or as a park, what happens there, what enables it to truly function as an industrial, ecosystem. It has to do with the energy that is available. It has to do with the roads, with the logistics. It has to do with with how easy it is to attract finance and funding, to such areas. And I think that it's also more because of the imperativeness of our circumstances. The fact that you are promoting industry and manufacturing in an atmosphere of severe challenges and constraints. What it is therefore is that we're going to do better in terms of industrial clusters, right, where you can have MSMEs, for example, get into the same location, and because of the support they're able to get from government in terms of all of this, they're able to scale, and all of that, because scaling is actually the key, because beyond the role of MSMEs and the narrative is out there. So clusters and parks are quite key. And I can tell you, for example, that we've made a lot of progress in terms of our partnership with the AFDB, under what we call the MSME Industrial Cluster Program, where across the country clusters have been identified. A lot of work has been done working with Deloitte, as advisories and all of that to that. So hoping that. So
has this helped you understand their needs, since you deal with them in clusters like the manufacturers, MSMEs? Has it been engaging with them? Have you understood their needs, and have you been able to implement some of their wants?
Of course, that is why we're where we are with the Industrial Cluster Program, thing, because Deloitte did quite a lot of work, across the country, in terms of identification of different clusters, and these clusters, in every state, the products that are promoted are the products that are peculiar, to those environments where there is competitiveness. And, so the study that has been done and the recommendations that have been made have had benefit of knowledge, benefit of information, benefit of understanding what the issues and the problems are. And those are the things that implementation will begin to tackle. And we have about $300 or $400 million, dollars, that is available under that program. And what, I look at this program as one of the greatest enablers in terms of the execution of the Nigerian industrial policy. Because imagine what will happen if you have about 20, 30, 40 industrial clusters across the country that are fully functional and that are contributing to job availability, are contributing to productivity, are contributing to export, of goods and services. That would be huge in terms of Nigeria's industrial journey.
How has the ministry been able to explore the use of the internet, digitalization, to ensure that there is industrial growth?
Well, if you look at Mr. President's, 8-point agenda, Agenda 7 is key, to responding to that question. That Agenda 7 is what speaks to the work of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, where Agenda 7 talks about accelerate diversification, right? And you do that through manufacturing, through digitization that you talked about. For the ministry, digitalization is key, to competitiveness. Digitalization is key in terms of, scale. Digitalization is an advancement in terms of, industry. When you talk about, industry 4.0, when you talk about all of that are elements that are involved in the ministry's focus. And I think that, and especially, it is through digitalization that you can have market access for the MSMEs, for example, that represent our engines of growth. So the emphasis and the thrust of the ministry's work is that digitalization is both for the present and for the future in terms of enabling industrial growth and manufacturing competitiveness under AFCFTA, under market access, and under all of that. So that remains also key.
On a final note, what are the key challenges that the ministry is faced with, and how are you trying to address them?
Okay, I think that most of what I'm going to mention here are already implicated in terms of in the course of this discussion. And what it is that for the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is how to promote industrial growth. That Nigeria cannot grow, Nigeria cannot achieve economic growth, right, without industry. Basically that the contribution of manufacturing to our GDP has to increase beyond the present single digit. It has to be competitive. In countries like China, manufacturing contribution is between 24 to 28%. I mean, if you go to India, it's about 20%, right? So the challenge is on how to grow, manufacturing contribution to GDP. And what is affecting that? The constraints, energy and all of that. And the good news is that in the Nigerian industrial policy, we've had a chance in one document to reflect all of these, right? And to get it into one operative framework that speaks to these constraints, that speaks to how to tackle these constraints and how to execute this and get us to have a solution that gets the ministry to be able to now respond solution-wise to its problems and challenges.
Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you again, Sharon.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.